I am April Rinne, and I am a futurist and advisor focused on all things flux. So a world in flux, a future in flux, unprecedented change and uncertainty, and what are we going to do when we don't know what to do? And I've been doing this for nearly 25 years, so it's not just a theme du jour, it's actually defined my life meaning and my life work. So I have always loved cultures, cultural diversity, getting to know other people and places, and that comes from having had a dad who was a cultural geographer. But what I've learned in my work and travels in more than 100 countries is that every single culture, people, society on the planet struggles with change and has developed unique ways of seeing it, talking about it, navigating through it. And everywhere that I've gone, I've discovered some little tidbit of human wisdom that's different lens, different perspective, words, concepts, rituals, traditions for how we navigate the unknown. And so a lot of what I do today is kind of this cross-pollination of bringing ideas and concepts from one place, one culture to somewhere else where it can be helpful. Because what we start to learn is that we are sitting on so much human wisdom when it comes to these issues that we're all dealing with today. And as a result, there's just a lot we can learn from one another if we can connect those dots. And so I help connect those dots. So when we say how do we relate to change, with a flux mindset, I'm trying to help people better embrace, understand, and appreciate and see all change. So not just the easy, fun, beautiful stuff, but the changes we don't control, the changes we didn't see coming, the changes that blindside us, those are the ones people really struggle with. A flux mindset is the ability to see all change, good and bad, but especially that stuff that we didn't want to have happen, to see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to improve. So I think of it as our mental muscle for change, and how to increase our tolerance for uncertainty and to improve our ability to harness the unknown. The single biggest experience, and I'm often asked, like, how did you get interested in change and uncertainty, and like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? It doesn't come from my resume, it doesn't come from my credentials, it doesn't come from the business world. It's actually deeply personal. And my entry into a world in flux happened when I was 20 and I was at university, and I got the phone call that no one wants to get. And that was that both of my parents had died in a car crash. And I realized it's kind of hard for a lot of people to talk about this kind of thing. I welcome it. I love actually talking about this because it's a point of human connection. But in that moment, at the age of 20, I lost my parents, I lost my family, my sense of self, my ideas about the future. Like, a lot of things just sort of, if they didn't disappear, they just crumbled. And I had to figure out how I was going to move forward amidst all of that flux, all of that unknown. And it took many years. It took a lot of work on many different levels. But I look back, and I never would have imagined back then that I would write a book called Flux or focus on these themes professionally. But that's where it really all began for me. And it feels like a real gift to be able to bring that into what I do today, because it is a fundamentally human approach to change. And I combine this human piece with the strategy, business, leadership pieces as well. But I come from a place not just of my head, but my heart. And that, to this day, is the single experience that has had the most profound effect on not just what I do, but how and why I do what I do. And it's a piece that I like to offer to others because we are all struggling with different kinds of unknowns, and sometimes those are personal, and sometimes they're professional, and sometimes they're societal and organizational. But it's a unique piece that brings my life work into this broader realm to be able to serve and help more people. One of the things, so when it comes to leadership, and when we think about what it means to be a great leader, one of the things that seems to be a real sticking point for a lot of people, a lot of leaders, a lot of people who look to leaders, etc., is that when we think about the skills and traits that have traditionally defined leadership, we often think that leaders have certainty. They have clarity. They know just what to do and they do it. They have the answers. That's what makes you a leader, right? Kind of. Not really today. In survey after survey after survey, the number one leadership quality needed today is comfort with ambiguity, tolerance for uncertainty, comfort with not knowing, and being able to lead yourself and others through that. And that's really hard for a lot of people. And a lot of leaders haven't learned those skills necessarily in the traditional world. And so we're having to retool and reskill and upskill even what it means to be a great leader. And so I think that that is one of the key pieces. The other piece I'm just going to mention here is that I often have leaders of a range of, in a range of organizations and sectors and so forth, but they're like, what should I have my team do? How do I help my team navigate change well? And I cannot underscore enough, at the risk of sounding trite or naive, this isn't just about what your team does. This has to start with you. And oftentimes, leaders can sometimes be the bottleneck for teams that very much want to change, but it's not like it's about what does your team do. If you can't actually own this and model this and be in the trenches alongside your team as a leader, navigating the unknown, trying to blaze new trails in uncharted territory, you're not going to have actually the respect of your team or the capacity and confidence to move forward amidst the unknown. So the other piece is, this isn't just about your team. You have to start with yourself. One of the reasons why we are so unhappy and rigid and frustrated amidst all kinds of uncertainty, I believe, isn't about uncertainty itself. It's about the kinds of systems we've designed. Not just the system of capitalism or the system of democracy or the system of compulsory education, but more broadly, I will say this is about living in a consumer-driven world, and in particular, this emphasis on more. I'm only going to be happy when I have more money, more power, more likes, more clicks, we're on this hamster wheel towards more. And it's making a lot of people miserable. And what I mean by that is that we fail to recognize that more is not where happiness is to be found. This sort of future forward happiness of I will be happy when, versus a recognition that actually we, each and every one of us, individually and together, have the ability to decide to be happy right now without any change, any magnificent thing happening. And I look at this in my book and in my work as the difference between living in a world that is obsessed with more and knowing and appreciating what is your enough. And enough is this sort of underappreciated concept that has actually been the priority for much of human history until these recent modern consumer social media driven days. And I have a Flux superpower, which is called knowing you're enough. And what's fascinating is that when you are always after ever more, you will never find enough. And I just want you to think about that by design. If you're always after more, what happens when you get more? You need more than that, and more than that. You keep kicking the can further down the road, and so happiness becomes something you never actually achieve. Versus when you, what I call, know you're enough, which is not too much and not too little, it is just enough, you immediately begin to find abundance. And anything that's more than enough is actually excess. It's kind of like when you take a trip. You want to have enough luggage. You want to have enough to stay warm, etc. But you don't want extra luggage. Extra luggage is baggage. And so I think about that. We often use that concept in travel, but why don't we apply that to the journey of life? So the difference between more and enough is a huge piece of our incessant unhappiness and frustration with the current world and how much change we're all experiencing. You're right. So much of what I do these days, I often describe it as I help people see differently, and I help them unlearn unhelpful practices that are no longer fit for today's world in flux. And frankly, one of the easiest, simplest, simple, it's not all simple, but one of the lowest hanging fruits, I think about this now, as a child, to not only understand what a flux mindset is and understand what it means to relate and show up to different kinds of change, and to see all change as an opportunity for growth and for learning and for improvement. That can be taught really, really young. And just a quick side note here, I am often asked, what's the difference between a flux mindset and a growth mindset? Kids are learning what a growth mindset is really young. These things are different, but they're related. And let me just explain a little bit. So a growth mindset concept was developed by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck about 40 years ago. It basically says that our capacity to learn and grow evolves over time. Our state of mind isn't fixed or determined at birth. And interestingly, this research focuses primarily on children and how they learn. And so children are actually the focus of a growth mindset. What I think one of the best things we can do is to layer on top of that what is this flux mindset, because a growth mindset doesn't really address how we deal with constant change and uncertainty. So if I were a teacher in the classroom, if I were spending my time around young kids, one of the things I would do is, alongside understanding this idea of what is a growth mindset, which kids around the world are now learning because the information and the theory is out there, we can now actually add to that the flux mindset, the fluxiness of how do we apply a growth mindset to navigate constant change. What's next for me? Well, a couple things. I do have another book proposal underway, which is building on flux, but it's really looking at these different cultural conceptions of change and these different concepts, and how can we all get better? What are the nuggets? I call them nuggets of wisdom for leaders about change from all over the world. So I'll let that be. That's probably coming into being in 2024. I also have a new series of workshops that are launching. So I give keynotes, but I also love doing the interactive stuff, the stuff that goes longer than 60 minutes. And so I have half-day, full-day, and multi-day workshops on flux mindset and the 8 flux superpowers. And last but not least, the concept of career portfolios and rethinking the future of talent and careers is kind of exploding. It is one of the 8 flux superpowers, and I've written quite a bit about it, and I will be doing more in terms of speaking, but also designing the tools to help people create and curate their own portfolios.